so excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for taking time. I know you are probably so busy, so I appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem at all.
For those that don't know you, this is Jason Less, CEO of the largest, correct me if I'm wrong, the largest publicly traded Bitcoin mining company in North America.
Well, there's a lot of metrics people use to measure that. I would say we have the largest facility in one location in North America, and I think probably soon the world.
And where is that?
That is out in Rockdale, Texas.
Okay. How often are you out there?
I go out there pretty often. I'm out about, probably at least once a month.
Wow.
Riot, we have offices out there. That's the bulk of our operation. We have about over 200 employees out there now. So definitely a main part of the business that I like to head out there to be at.
So tell me a little bit, this is for the people like myself who aren't super familiar with crypto, but are interested in it and investing in Bitcoin and all of that fun stuff. So this is going to be a lot more simple than you're probably used to, but I think it's super important just to get the word out for people like myself who are interested in it, but might not know where to find the correct information or stuff like that. So tell me, simply put, what is Bitcoin?
Okay, so Bitcoin is a decentralized financial system. It's not in the control of any one person or party or groups of people. It's a totally transparent system that's run on open code that people can use to hold the native currency Bitcoin for themselves. That enables holders of Bitcoin or users of Bitcoin to send money globally instantly without any third parties in the way of that transaction. Further, the native currency Bitcoin has a finite hard-coded supply schedule. And I think that's especially relevant in at the time we are right now, where a lot of people are very mindful of inflation and what's going on there.
Right.
That's one of the reasons that Bitcoin was introduced, to have a money that had a fixed supply that could not be changed. So as a holder of Bitcoin, you own whatever, if you own one Bitcoin, that's one of only 21 billion Bitcoin that will ever be mined, that will ever be available. So as the adoption of Bitcoin has increased over its 13-year history, so has the market value of that finite amount of Bitcoin that's out there.
So is it a true fact that there is not enough Bitcoin for every millionaire to have one?
I believe so. I've heard that statistic before as well. I believe that, there's 21 million Bitcoin out there. Probably about 4 million Bitcoin is just lost forever from
people accidentally threw it away.
Exactly.
Have you ever lost any yourself?
No. That's why I always tell people to be very careful and slow about how you use Bitcoin. You don't know what could happen if you're new to it. I'm an experienced user. So I learned a lot about how it worked before I ever did anything. So I've always felt very comfortable moving it around, doing all of that, but always, being very careful, because what makes Bitcoin valuable is you can't reverse transactions. So that means if you make a mistake, it cannot be reversed.
I've done that. You know that. Oh, yeah. I've definitely sent some money into, I like to call it outer space, but you would call it the blockchain, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, once it goes out there, it can be difficult or not impossible to get back unless the person who has it wants to send it back to you.
Absolutely, which is probably not the case. So you are in the blockchain or Bitcoin mining. How is that different from just being a Bitcoin trader, investor? That just seems like way more advanced, correct?
Yeah, I guess the way it depends on how you look at it. So you can look at Bitcoin mining as really that tangible infrastructure that you can look, see, and feel that underscores what makes Bitcoin work. So, I talked about Bitcoin being a decentralized currency. I talked about it being a transparent currency. So you have this system that has an accounting ledger that anyone globally can verify for themselves. So how do you have an accounting ledger that everyone all over the world agrees on without having some, master of truth somewhere? And Bitcoin mining is how that's accomplished. Bitcoin mining is the process by which new blocks are found, and those blocks are added to the blockchain, which is that distributed ledger that I've been talking about. Bitcoin miners are using computing power and energy to do work, and that work is required to find one of these blocks. So when, for example, Riot as a miner puts a new block out into the network, everyone knows that work was done to find that block. Real world resources, energy, and computing power were spent by Riot to find that block. And why that's important, it's because that means there's skin in the game that incentivizes honest behavior. We're doing this for a Bitcoin reward. We're spending this money in hopes of getting that Bitcoin reward. So if we were dishonest, if we put fake transactions in there, if we started trying to change the rules of Bitcoin, our block would be comprehensively rejected by the rest of the network, and Riot would lose money. So
when you say Bitcoin reward, does that mean the price of one Bitcoin?
What I mean is, for every block that's found, there is a reward that miners get for finding that block. And whatever the price of Bitcoin is whatever it is. So right now, there's blocks. Well, not right now, but in general, Bitcoin blocks are found and added to the blockchain every 10 minutes. The miner that finds that block, that successfully finds it before everyone else by doing their work, gets a reward of 6.25 Bitcoin plus any transaction fees in that block.
So a normal person can mine Bitcoin?
They can, however, anyone can mine Bitcoin too. That's what's awesome. Riot is we're a large publicly traded company.
Right.
We've invested a lot to have very large operations. But you, Melissa, could buy a piece of Bitcoin mining hardware and you could run it in your garage and you would be a part of mining. Now, your rewards, the rewards you get are only relative to the amount of power you have, amount of power you have relative to the rest of the network. But you yourself could definitely do that if you wanted.
Is it an expensive thing to buy?
It is. So the hardware, it tends to scale kind of with the price of Bitcoin, actually. The more expensive Bitcoin is, the more profitable mining is, and the more expensive this hardware is. Right now, Bitcoin has gone down a bit recently, and it's a lot less expensive. So here's an example of like a piece of Bitcoin mining hardware.
Wow.
This is the latest generation thing. This is like what you would run. You can put one in your garage.
Right.
Riot currently operates about 40,000 of these, and that is probably selling for around $3,000 right now.
What is your goal? So you have 40,000 now. What would be your goal?
We have 40,000, and then we've already entered in purchase agreements to grow our fleet even further through the first quarter of 2023. So we receive thousands of these every single month that we try to deploy in our operation as quickly as possible. When all of our orders are deployed, we'll have about 115,000.
Wow. So you touched briefly on the price and the fact that it's I guess I wouldn't say slightly, but I would say down right now. Why do you think that is, or why is it so volatile?
Yeah, that's tough to give I think a definitive answer on. I think Bitcoin historically has been very cyclical. Bitcoin started at $0. There was no value when Bitcoin started in 2009. If people can believe it, you can look back on the Bitcoin forums in like 2009, 2010, and there's people that are like, okay, I've been trying to sell my 5,000 Bitcoin for $5.
Right.
No one wants to buy it. So looks like I just had some video problems here.
You froze on me.
Yeah, okay,
there
I'm
you
back.
are.
So it started from nothing, and as adoption has increased over time, it has become more and more expensive, more and more valuable. And we've seen price swings. It went up to $20, it went down to $5. It went up to $1,000, it went down to $100. It went up to 20,000, went down to 3,500. And most recently it went up to 69,000, and now we're down to 23,000. I think what you have is a asset unlike any other in history. Mm-hmm. No other asset in history has had a definitively constrained supply schedule. People say, gold. Okay, gold is somewhat close, but the fact is, when gold is more expensive, gold miners just go out and mine more gold. Diamonds, okay, they're rare, but there's asteroids floating around with trillions of dollars of diamonds on them too. So Bitcoin is the one thing that we could definitively know is rare. And when you look at something that's in its early stages, people don't know how to value it. People panic in and out of it. That creates a lot of volatility. You can kind of think about it actually very similar to the dot-com kind of boom bust cycle of the end of the 90s, going into 2000s, et cetera. Stocks were going crazy through the end of the 90s. There was all this, people knew that the internet was the next thing, and there seemed to be all sorts of value. And then people had second thoughts, and then, the market has come back cyclically since then. I think Bitcoin is very similar. And I think as it is growing in adoption, I think the price reflects the growing kind of global belief in the system. You're adding more and more holders of last resort, is what we call them, more and more buyers of Bitcoin that are unwilling to sell because they have the long-term view. And as that, kind of increases, that's another way you're taking supply outside of the market, and that's, driving the price up over time. So I think the short answer is it's a finite asset, and it's still in its infancy, and there's shaking degrees of faith in it sometimes. But you look over the history of Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin has always proven to be a very profitable investment strategy over the long run.
Right. So speaking of that, why do you personally only hold Bitcoin and not all these, other things like Ethereum or anything that people are all in on or raving about? Why do you lean fully towards Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Bitcoin to me, number one, I think most importantly solves the greatest problem out there, and that's having a free money. Money is the number one way, the fundamental way that we all as humans communicate and interact with each other. Yes, we talk, we write, etc. But we can all talk and write anything. One's true expression only comes through the commerce they're undertaking, buying or selling goods or services. And having the freedom to do that unimpeded, I think, is critical to having a free society. And I think having a money that is outside the control of any person, groups of people, party, or government is very important to human freedom. So to me, Bitcoin is a critical tool to achieving human freedom. That is why I'm so passionate about it, because it attacks these very fundamental problems. Now, there's other cryptocurrencies and such out there that address, their own use cases as well. I think for a lot of them, it's very questionable whether or not there's truly not someone in control of that. I think a lot of cryptocurrencies, and you see news headlines almost every week now, have security vulnerabilities because they were not built with that fundamental security mindset in place. They're all kind of competing like commercial software projects. So is there opportunity for these other projects to succeed in some way? I'm sure there is. Frankly, it takes all of my energy just to focus on Bitcoin, and following what's going along there. And to me, that's the bet and attention that I want to focus on.
Absolutely. So I heard a rumor that you met with Elon Musk. Is that true?
So a year ago, a little over a year ago, so it was February 2021 that Tesla announced that it was buying Bitcoin to hold on its balance sheet.
Yes.
And I know it was February 8th. It's a very important day to me because that was the first day I was CEO of Riot.
Wow.
So Riot stock, Bitcoin went up on the Tesla news, and therefore Riot stock went up a lot of Tesla news, which means the Riot stock went up a lot the day I was announced as CEO, and no one can ever take that away from me.
Absolutely. I think I actually bought that day. So hopefully we can recover a little.
So that's just a fun tidbit on the side. But it was after a couple months of Tesla owning Bitcoin that Elon Musk had tweeted out, I think, concerns around Bitcoin mining's carbon footprint, climate impact. And a group of large Bitcoin miners arranged a call with him so we could just simply talk about what we're doing, educate on what we're doing as an industry. Because It's actually not something that a lot of people, even within Bitcoin, know a lot about. Not a lot of people even know what's going on with mining.
Right.
So we believe we have a very positive story on how Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining is impacting the climate and driving additional generation development, supporting renewable generation projects. So we wanted an opportunity to talk with Elon and explain that side of the story. And his advice was basically, you guys should tell the story, more publicly, because people should want to hear this. And that led to the formation of something that we call the Bitcoin Mining Council, which is really just, at this point, about half of the miners in the world. And we put together our energy usage and generation mix data up on a quarterly basis. And we put out a report that demonstrates that Bitcoin mining uses more renewable generation more renewable power than any major industry, than any major country. Wow. Bitcoin mining uses close to 60% renewable generation. And that's because we're indifferent to where we operate, and we will buy energy anywhere at any time around the clock.
Why do you think there's so many haters of crypto, Bitcoin, or do you feel like that's not really the case anymore?
No, certainly it is still the case.
Okay.
I think it's something that's hard for people to understand. It's very difficult for people, and in some ways it's a generational thing. I think for younger generations, it's not hard at all to explain, hey, this, in this video game item has value. And younger generations get that. This is scarce. I want this. Other people want that. That's why this has value. Even though it's not tangible, like something I can pick up and hold, it has value through this code that's there. And that's how Bitcoin, in addition to its other properties, drives its value. So I think it's difficult for people to understand. And a lot of people are just negative on new things they don't get. People were negative on the internet. You can find the same critics, the very same critics of Bitcoin today, Paul Krugman. You can go back 20 years ago, and he's predicting the internet will be about as impactful as the fax machine. So there's a history of people who just have trouble accepting evolutions in technology, and they're critical on Bitcoin as a result. So what we are working on a lot actually at Riot, not only our own business, but we're working on a lot of educational efforts as well to teach people more about Bitcoin and dispel a lot of these myths that maybe turn people off.
Right. So would you say for just the average person that's curious about it, how would they go out and get more truthful information? Because I feel like there's so much information on TikTok, and it's like, where do you get your reliable source of information in regards to the industry as a whole?
So, I mean, for me, I love following the right people on Twitter and on YouTube. And there's also really great books out there. I think one of the best books out there for people at any level of interest in Bitcoin is one called The Bitcoin Standard by a gentleman named Saifedean. That is an incredible book on the history of money. It really explains how we as humankind have arrived at the point of needing Bitcoin, and then takes you through how Bitcoin works and why that's valuable. I think that's an incredible source. And then, you can follow him and others on Twitter. Another particularly great follow is someone named Pierre Richard, who actually just started at Riot as our VP of research. Right. But he has been a big, if not the biggest Bitcoin evangelist in the space for a long time. And I think you start following those individuals, and there's like a web of resources that'll branch out from there on Twitter and YouTube that you can follow. And I think that's good from educating from home. And what I've personally found very impactful is going out to Bitcoin meetups. Almost anywhere where you live, there's going to be a Bitcoin meetup group.
How do you find those? Just Google?
Yeah, I mean, so the one I found was on, I think, just like meetups.com before.
Okay.
I found one that was happening over in Irvine, and it kind of started off with just like 6 people at a Carl Strauss, and then like evolved into a much bigger thing that goes on all the time. So that's the Orange County Bitcoin meetup. And I'm sure there's a resource that categorizes Bitcoin meetups.
I love that.
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's really so cool. You meet all different types of people because
Right.
Bitcoin, it's not like, even though, I talk about there being maybe some generational gaps in the understanding and adoption, you will go to a Bitcoin meetup and you will find like everyone from a 16-year-old kid to a 70-year-old priest. Like
Right.
they're everything and all in between. Bitcoin brings a lot of people together, and it's a great way to learn more about, the whole ecosystem itself.
What do you say to the person who looks at the price of Bitcoin today, whether it's 20, 24, $30,000, and they don't have enough to buy one, so they feel like buying a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of one isn't really beneficial? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's important, like you touched on, you can own a fraction of a Bitcoin, and that is okay. A unit that we actually use to divide Bitcoin is something called sats. So you can divide one Bitcoin into, and my math is going to be tested here because I don't remember off the top of my head, but one Bitcoin is essentially 10 million sats. So if you own 2.5 million sats, that's a quarter of a Bitcoin. And that's a good way to think about it as well. SAT stands for Satoshi, which was the anonymous creator of Bitcoin, who's now gone and has, not involved whatsoever. But which is another valuable part about Bitcoin. Someone created this, they have no control, and then they've disappeared, which is
I was going to say, don't we not know who created it? Is that
no idea? Which is crazy. Someone made this and basically put it in the hands of the community,
Wow.
and disappeared. And if sometimes people wonder, oh, what if this person comes back? They would have no any more influence than you or I outside of kind of being popular. But to your question on a fraction, people should feel very comfortable about owning a fraction of a currency.
Right.
You'd rather have a fraction of something valuable with long-term viability than a whole of whatever coin. And I think a lot of people, they log on to Coinbase or whatever, and they just think, I want to own one of a thing, and Bitcoin is too much.
Right.
You can own a fraction of a Bitcoin, and that's perfectly okay.
Perfect. So I know there's a lot of talk too about the SEC regulating Bitcoin, and there's some drama around that. Is that going to be a positive thing, negative thing? What is going on with that?
I think overall, regulatory clarity is good for Bitcoin. And I'm not saying that I'm inviting regulation. I'm saying I think a lot of money sits on the sidelines because investors don't know what regulators are going to do. And that unknown component just kind of keeps money at the sidelines. So for example, it was about a year ago, there was an amendment to a bill being proposed in the House, and it was, honestly not great for Bitcoin. We were doing work to try and get that amendment out of there. But just by virtue of that type of clarity going forward, the price of Bitcoin was going up because I believe investors were looking at that. They were like, okay, well, if this is happening, then that kind of means it's, because the government's doing something, that means it's okay. I think ultimately, what's good about Bitcoin is it's not a security. So I would not suspect that it ultimately falls under the purview of the Securities and Exchange Commission, although that's kind of up to the government and Congress to, I think, eventually decide how that's allocated. I think the most recent legislation has focused around the CFTC being the overseer regulator of Bitcoin as a commodity. But if you watch on social media, sometimes it kind of seems like the SEC and the CFTC are both kind of vying for some type of influence here.
Right.
I think the regulation that the government needs with Bitcoin is kind of already there. There's AML and KYC procedures that different exchanges have to follow. Very similar to if you had cash and you had a cash business or anything else. It kind of fits into that existing framework. And I think if that was just clarified, that would, be helpful to the industry. I don't think there's necessarily additional regulatory framework that needs to be created for just Bitcoin.
Interesting. I don't know if you're allowed to answer this, but if you had to give your best guess of the price of Bitcoin in 5 years and 10 years, what would you put your money on?
I mean, I can certainly guess. I just would not feel confident in what my guess
Of
is.
course.
It's so crazy. I mean, 2 years ago, Bitcoin was trading at what? 2 years ago would have been about 12,000. If you had told me that over the next 12 months from that point, it would hit 60, 70,000, I would have been blown away. Bitcoin always has exceeded my expectations. In fact, I remember at the start of 2017, Bitcoin was like, I think at the time was trading at like 700, and I saw someone project it was going to be $1,400 by the end of the year, and I was like, that is too crazy. There's no way Bitcoin's going to 1,400.
Right.
So it always has a way of exceeding expectations. I think if you look at something that has the potential, and I believe will be the dominant store of value asset, because it is open and free, because it's accessible to anyone globally, the final implications of what that whole system is worth, and therefore the proportional Bitcoin amount, is just massive. I mean, it truly is like trillions and trillions of dollars.
Wow.
So with a very long time preference, in 5 years, I don't know what Bitcoin could be. Very, very high. It would be, people talk about a $1 million Bitcoin, and
Wait, how long till you see that in your mind?
I have no predict. I just know that I believe it's an eventuality.
Right. In your lifetime.
Oh yeah, in my lifetime.
Okay,
I mean, I think I look at $1 million Bitcoin the way people looked at a $10,000 Bitcoin, I don't know, 7 years ago or something,
right.
Like 7, 8 years ago. That seemed like a far off, but a goal that people believed in, and I could see the same thing playing out for Bitcoin
right.
today.
Is this true that people accept it more in other countries than they do in the United States, or is that not the case anymore?
I'm not really sure about that. I think there's a lot of growing merchant adoption of Bitcoin within here in the United States. There's more and more places you can spend it. Personally, I like to hold Bitcoin. I don't have the same need to spend it, but internationally, there are countries where people need to spend Bitcoin to survive. The Bitcoin solves this humanitarian really crisis that's happening all over not all over the place, but humanitarian crises that are happening in other nations that don't have the same wonderful living conditions that we do. Right. They need Bitcoin to just conduct basic commerce. They need Bitcoin as something to hold so their paycheck isn't inflated away from them by the time they go to try to buy bread at the grocery store. People need to use Bitcoin just to conduct basic commerce outside of their government stopping them from doing so. Now, that's not, I think there's probably varying opinions to the extent that's happening in the United States.
Right.
Certainly a problem that we've seen in North America. And I think I think that in the United States, we live in a more privileged position than many other nations in the world.
Absolutely.
Who really need Bitcoin just to survive.
Absolutely. Because it seems hard to me. Like, I have mine on a hard wallet. It seems almost impossible for me to, I don't even know how I would use that on a day-to-day basis. So people have this money on their phones and they're buying groceries with it, or?
Yeah, you can certainly do that. There's a growing, we'll call it second layer of Bitcoin. It's something called the Lightning Network. And I think a good way to think about that is it's like your checking account. So you, Melissa, have your hardware wallet that's kind of like your vault savings of Bitcoin.
Right.
And then you could put whatever Bitcoin you wanted for spending into a Lightning wallet, which would likely just be on your phone. And that's something that you could go up. You can do instant, free, I shouldn't say free, but very, very, very low fee transactions whenever you wanted.
So Coinbase wouldn't be considered a Lightning wallet. That's not something that you can just use to pay.
Correct. I mean, you could pay for things out of Coinbase, I guess, technically, but it would be a little slow. If you're going if you're buying Starbucks, you can't be like, okay, hold on, I'm logging into my Coinbase account. We're going to initiate a withdrawal. Hold on, I got to make sure this address is whitelisted. Hold on, that doesn't. You need something on your phone.
That's how I picture it. So can you buy Starbucks today in the United States with Bitcoin?
I don't. God, I'm not sure. I think I believe that there was an announcement a while ago that there was going to be merchant acceptance of Bitcoin at Starbucks, and I think it might only be in limited locations right now.
Okay.
But I feel like it's the adoption has grown so much. I don't even really notice anymore. Like there's so many places that's like, oh, you could pay for Bitcoin right here.
Right.
But it's just becoming more and more commonplace. But I don't think it's like full rolled out in large scale and like Starbucks or McDonald's or any type of.
And in 10, 15 years, do you think that'll be the case?
Oh yeah, for sure. I would think a lot sooner than that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So to be able to buy pretty much anything in 10 years with Bitcoin.
Yeah. And you can do a lot with Bitcoin now. You can buy houses with Bitcoin. There's people that are selling their homes only wanting Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I believe the Ferrari dealership here in Orange County in Newport Beach accepts Bitcoin. Like,
wow.
You can do a lot.
Pretty crazy. What is one piece of advice you would have for someone who has absolutely no crypto? They've been wanting, because I feel like I have friends that like have talked about it, wanting to buy it, but they never do. I don't know if they're scared or it just takes too much time to go on there and do it. But like, what piece of advice would you tell your friend that has $0 in it and maybe has a little bit of extra money on the side?
So I think the main thing that holds people back is they want to just jump in there and they're trying to time the market. And there's never a good time because the people that didn't want to buy at 69,000 because it's too expensive don't want to buy now because they're afraid it's going to keep going down more.
Right.
And the simple advice I try to tell people about Bitcoin is you don't need to try to hit a home run on your first buy. You can just buy a little bit. It's a concept called dollar cost averaging. People are familiar with any type of other financial instrument. You buy a little here. There's products even, for example, Swan Bitcoin is a great service. I think Coinbase probably offers this as well. You can just set up automatic buys of Bitcoin every 2 weeks if you wanted.
Right.
Let's say $100 out of my paycheck, I want to automatically buy Bitcoin every 2 weeks. And over time, you're going to build up a little position here. So that is how I would recommend people approaching that investment instead of just trying to just time the bottom of the market and just go, make their full buy and hope that works out.
Right.
De-risk yourselves a bit. And then second, I think what's really important is to learn about how this works and why it's important.
Yeah.
Buy the Bitcoin Standard for whatever it is on Amazon, $30 or $40. Read that book or go to YouTube and search for videos from Robert Breedlove. There's another great person. There's a podcast series by Peter McCormick called What Bitcoin Did. Watch that to learn about Bitcoin. Learn about what your investment is.
Yeah.
Don't just throw money in trying to make it go up.
Right.
You will not withstand the test of time.
Right.
I've held onto the Bitcoin that I have because I have a fundamental long-term belief.
Right.
Not because I'm trying to make money.
Absolutely. So same for me. I purchased originally when it was, I think, 5,400 a coin. Did I fail by not selling when it was up and then buy? Like, I just haven't touched it. Was that a huge miss? No,
that is, think about how it is unrealistic to expect that you're going to be, this spot on brilliant trader who's going to sell when sell when it's high, then buy again when it's low.
Right.
People spend their entire careers trying to do that. They barely outperform the stock market index. It's very difficult to time a market. Don't make yourself try to do that. It's not a mistake because you miss these different highs or different lows. With a long-term vision, you're just going like this over time. If you look at the Bitcoin log graph over time, like that is what you're seeing. So just don't. It's important for people not to second guess themselves. If you develop an investment thesis, stick to that thesis.
Okay. Are there people, and how do you find someone you can trust, like a regular financial advisor? Are there people who will strictly invest crypto for you? And is that reliable at all, would you say?
I'm not really familiar with any services like that. I mean, I think
Yeah.
I've kind of tangentially heard about them.
Hmm.
I think the whole point about Bitcoin is sovereign control of your own money.
Yeah.
So
True.
if you are a believer in Bitcoin, you should be utilizing its properties to the full extent, which means buying it, which means getting your own type of hardware wallet and
Yep.
holding that Bitcoin entirely for yourself so no one can take it.
Right.
That's what's amazing about Bitcoin. You could ultimately reduce a Bitcoin wallet to 12 words, which we call a mnemonic phrase. You could memorize those words in your head and you would control that Bitcoin wallet and no one in the world could take that from you.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy. Well, I appreciate you so much. Do you have any extra special advice or information that you think would be really cool for us to know?
I think that I think a lot of people in Bitcoin are often wondering, or looking at Bitcoin are often wondering, am I early or am I late?
Mhm.
And if you understand what Bitcoin is and you understand the transformative impact it will have by cannibalizing so much of the financial industry,
Right.
you have no idea how early we still are. So I encourage people to, one, just try to learn about what this, even if you are critical,
Right.
just learn about what the technology is and how it works to entertain your intellectual curiosity. Make an investment come second after you've taken that step. And I think I truly believe anyone who understands how Bitcoin works and understands the problem it solves, if they honestly approach that exercise, they will become, they will become very interested in owning some Bitcoin and using it for themselves.
Right. Thank you so much, Jason. It was such a pleasure speaking with you. I have been excited about it and interested, and you've helped me in the past with my hard wallet, and I just appreciate the information. And it's so cool to see you doing so well in this space because it's just amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for having me on here. This was fun.
Have a good day.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye.